Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. This is William Hindman, and this is Just Force 911, where we look at how our public officials do their job, or they just really pooch screw it up. Hey, guys, today's video is coming from ABC 15, Dave Biscabine, and it's some sad news coming from our government. We knew this was coming. If you would do me a favor, please subscribe to my channel. We're almost at 3,700 subscribers. Hit the like and share because it helps my algorithms. And give me a thumbs up if you would and leave me a comment. This is coming from the federal government. The DOJ is basically from across the country throwing out all of the investigations on the First and Fourth and 14th Amendment that have been broken by police officials across the country. And this is a sad day for America. It really is. We have a Constitution of the United States for a reason, and they're doing their very best to destroy that. So let's check this out, guys, and you tell me what you think, and I will try to stay out of it, even though it's not going to happen, but we can hope and pray. Here we go.
Well, it's a big week involving the future of policing, not only in Arizona, but also across America. That is because the U.S. Department of Justice made an announcement on Wednesday about their civil rights investigations of police departments. They've now decided that they're closing all of those investigations and they're rescinding the findings in places like Phoenix. I'm ABC 15 senior investigative reporter Melissa Blasius.
And I'm ABC 15 chief investigator Dave Biscabing. And, you know, Melissa, I think everybody knew this was coming. But I guess getting to that day and having it happen, it still felt surprising in its own way, especially the decision to just basically take this 100-some page report and just toss it. I guess, you know, from the people you spoke to yesterday, what was kind of their reaction to the idea, not only that they were shutting it down, but essentially erasing the findings?
Sure. Well, a lot of the people that I talked to yesterday were people who had lost a loved one in an officer-involved shooting or had been arrested, they believe, unjustifiably by Phoenix police. And so they were telling me yesterday when this announcement came out on Wednesday that they were heartbroken. Some of them were crying on the phone as they talked to me because they really felt that the Department of Justice, when they investigated Phoenix police, when they came out with their findings that found a pattern or practice of civil rights violations, that they had a powerful ally. And for once that someone believed what they were saying and agreed with them that there had been constitutional violations.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, some of what I've heard is that people were like, okay, I sat down, I went through this, what happened to me was bad, but then I was willing to take this extra risk or this step to work with the Department of Justice, speak to them, and then they feel like, was this all for nothing, right? I don't know if expectations were necessarily extremely high, but now to have it basically be entirely undone, the feeling is, what was it for, right? And that's a lot of what I heard from people as well.
Well, and you've been talking to people for several months now about what they expected to be a reversal in this report with the change of administration. What had you been hearing, and what did the Trump administration say yesterday?
I mean, well, you know, the Trump administration says, well, you know, it's a factually inaccurate report. We're taking it away, right? It's not. I mean, you know, a lot of what in here is stuff that we've reported on before. What happened is absolutely true, and a lot of the findings in this report are just irrefutably true. But, you know, I think what I heard from a lot of people and what always struck me through the process is, I mean, look at the date of the report when it came out, June 13, 2024. It took them almost 3 years to release this, and then they did. And then nothing happened for months and months and months, and it got all the way to the election, and President Trump won the election. And it was like, so if the DOJ released this report, why wasn't it ready to actually take action? So Phoenix balked, right? They said, well, we're not going to sign any agreement. We're not going to agree to any oversight. Let's play this out. And the DOJ came out when they released this report and said, no, this is a department that can't police itself. and then they weren't prepared to do anything. I guess that just was really confusing to a lot of people, is if you've had 3 years to put this together and you knew you're going to be releasing what's considered one of the worst, if not the worst reports they've ever put out, why did you just wait? Like, was this was there no plan or thought? Why go through all this effort then just to wait and then eventually have this taken away, right? And so I guess people are really confused about the lack of follow through or consideration of what could happen. And now we're here. Trump wins, right? The public voted him in, and he rescinds all of this, and it's like, okay, it's all that wasted time, all that wasted money, all that wasted effort for everyone involved, and it's just a lot of confusion, in that waiting process for people.
And keep in mind that this does not look good for the Department of Justice. It basically makes them look like they are completely and totally inept, like the rest of our federal government. We have DOJ, who has found corruption after corruption after corruption, and the DOJ can't do anything about it. It takes the Senate or the House of Representatives to do something about it, and they just, or Congress, and they just flat refuse to do anything with it. So what are we talking about, people? We have a broken system. Let's either get this thing fixed or there's going to be a revolution. And, I hate to say it, but it's coming, people. It really is. And if you people think it's not, you need to pull your head out of the sand, because, baby doll, it's coming.
And obviously here in Phoenix, there has been a wide variety of opinion about whether the Phoenix Police Department needs outside oversight or whether or not it can reform itself, whether it even needs significant additional reform. We've been hearing over the last few days. The head of the Sergeants and Lieutenants Union talked to us and said that they think that they have been reforming. They have body cameras. That's why we know a lot of this happened and exactly how it happened, because we saw it on body camera. That they've done changes to their use of force policy, that there have been changes to how they police protest situations.
That's what they say, right? And you and I know that a lot of these things happen because they were exposed and they were forced to do these things. Body cameras that's the expectation from the public. That is not something the public thinks you get a feather in your cap for. That is the reality of what the expectation is now. Changing the use of force policy, doing all those changes they're touting, that's because of this. This started, and then they're like, oh crap, we better get some things in line so it doesn't end up as bad for us. So they're trying to take credit for things that they were forced to do. So I guess, even though this was rescinded, it did prompt this reform. Now we'll see if they stay true to their word and they actually follow these things through. But I mean, if they were serious about doing those things, that would have been happened, and however many number of the incidents where they, did things wrong, over the years. It wouldn't have taken a report, to do that. I mean, some of this stuff we didn't even know about. I mean, horrible things, young children with special needs being choked and, verbally berated by officers. I mean, this is well publicized, right? Protesters being falsely charged as gang members, issues with the homeless in the zone. I mean, just people being, essentially violently arrested and kind of beaten up just because they criticized a police officer. The challenge coin, the hate speech inspired challenge coin that the officers were sharing and selling.
Celebrating their use of force against protesters.
The choke holds being called compassion holds, even during the Department of Justice kind of investigation. So, I mean, we'll see if the reforms actually happen and if they stick. A lot of these things haven't even been implemented. You've reported on that quite a bit, that these are things on paper right now. They're not necessarily in practice. But one of the things I think is interesting is after this report came out, in this dead period between, the report coming out and where we are now, is we kept seeing really horrific incidents happen, right? We have the Tyrone McAlpin case. That's the deaf man with cerebral palsy who, without warning, was violently arrested, and he had done nothing wrong, right? And they even tried to charge him then with resisting arrest and aggravated assault when he was punched 10 times in the head and tasered 5 times, I think. And then I don't mean it, but and then even more, we have the guy that was burned. I don't even know if I should show the pictures, because they pinned him on the blacktop. And these are instances where the police actually kind of cleared the officers initially and then didn't even open internal investigations until stories came out about it. So,
and we still see some of these things. The use of force policy has changed to prevent officers from doing strikes to the head, punching somebody in the head repeatedly, unless deadly force is justified.
Right.
They were in the process of changing the policy, almost fully implemented, when we did a story about a man, Joseph Safala, who was called. Police were called to his situation because he was wandering in the street, possible suicidal man. They pull him over on the side of the street, and they end up repeatedly punching him in the head, ultimately. So we continue to see these kinds of instances. The folks that I talked to yesterday who have been impacted by Phoenix police use of force and arrest, they said, even though the DOJ basically has come back and said, we're just going to erase all of this, it never happened, we don't stand by it anymore, that they say this is still history. This is still history in Phoenix. People who saw it can't unsee it. People who did it can't undo it. And so the question is where do we go from here?
I guess that's really the unique question. Can we really trust that Phoenix officials who let this all happen, do we trust them to say when they really can conduct oversight, which, history has told us that they haven't been able to, but, the council changes over. They have a new council member Ana Hernandez, whose brother was killed by Phoenix PD. So, there's different pressure and people on that council now, so we'll see. But, it also makes me wonder, now that the DOJ is officially out, are any community groups or legal groups going to step in, bring litigation? Either in focused ways, maybe just on homelessness or maybe just on use of force, or could it be something more comprehensive like we saw with the sheriff's office? We hear a lot about federal oversight doesn't work, federal monitors don't work, look at MCSO, but that's a very different situation. That wasn't the DOJ coming in and negotiating a consent agreement. That was a community group and legal group coming forward and bringing a lawsuit and convincing the court, a judge, to show that MCSO can't police itself. They have massive problems, and that's how that happened. It wasn't DOJ-led. And so is that a possibility here? I don't know if it'll happen, but it's a possibility. So I guess we'll have to see if this prompts some people to step in.
So what they're actually saying is DOJ has been a joke from the beginning. And unfortunately, that's the way most federal government entities are. The federal government has not had one program that has ever worked the way it was supposed to. It flushes money. It just, it's just a joke. Our federal government is a joke.
Yeah, for a class action lawsuit or something.
Yeah.
On that. The people I talked to a civil rights lawyer yesterday who said there's still opportunity to hold Phoenix police accountable. If you believe civil rights violations have occurred, you can always file a lawsuit and take it through the courts. We've seen a number of multi-million-dollar settlements in what was called by some Phoenix's I Can't Breathe case, Muhammad Muhaiman. There was a multi-million-dollar settlement there. We've seen that in some other prone restraint deaths.
What was the case? The guy that was throwing rocks that...
Ali Osman.
Correct. That was a $4 million, I think, settlement too. What's going to be interesting is that officer's now suing Phoenix to try and get his job back. So and there's still the current litigation too, right? Like these protesters are still suing Phoenix for being falsely charged. There's several of those protesters still involved in cases, and there's several new use of force cases being filed, and some have attempted to bring this report in as evidence, so it's going to be interesting to see how the court addresses it now, since it's no longer a recognized document by the U.S. government. But will judges accept this kind of as establishing a pattern or practice, deliberate indifference, et cetera, when it comes to these cases?
Well, it is an interesting question. Also, a big question in the city of Phoenix in particular is that they are currently searching for a new police chief. The last police chief, the man who helped author this report here, the Phoenix Police Department Road to Reform report, former interim police chief Michael Sullivan, actually had previously worked with the Department of Justice in doing police reforms in other cities. A lot of the language in here, the suggested policies, somewhat echo what a Department of Justice-led
Report looks like.
reform
Yep.
would look like. However, a new chief could come in and say, we're not interested in this, or
What's interesting is that they brought in Michael Sullivan as like a fixer, right? He had been through this process in Louisville and in Baltimore, and he puts together this report. He institutes some of these reforms, and then when it comes to picking a new chief, they basically tell him, thanks for the work over the years, but thanks but no thanks. And he then decides it's not the place for him. He's resigns pretty quickly. I mean, there wasn't really a transition period. I mean, he was out of here within a few weeks once that happened. And now we have, a new acting chief at the moment. And that acting chief just made a bunch of command level changes, changed the whole assistant chief structure, who's going to be an assistant chief, switched around some commanders and assignments, which is not really acting interim chief kind of movement. So is this happening with the blessing of City Hall? There's a lot of questions about what that new chief search to me is going to look like, who they're looking to identify. Do they already have someone in mind? Is the guy in the chair based on what they're letting him do? He's making huge changes. Is someone going to come in 3 months and not get to set his own command staff? I mean, these are really interesting questions for me, and it makes me wonder, is this going to still be on the table? Is the new chief going to look at the reforms and, then tell the city council, yeah, we're going to do things a little different, Is Phoenix going to go back to kind of how they've always done things? I mean, it's the chief thing. The new chief looms over all of this, and so.
Well, and some of that's directed by the city manager and Mayor Kate Gallego and City Council. Mayor Kate Gallego came out Wednesday and said that the reforms that City Council approved, which was a list of 2025 reforms for the police department, that she's still committed to making sure that those come to fruition, with or without DOJ kind of looking in on them. But, and we have to remember, in the end, the DOJ report, an investigation, all started because people were willing to speak out about what they felt were injustices, and that we did quite a bit of reporting on that and those claims, and brought it to a national stage into really the point where government had to take a good look at it and take some action. So if people do want to continue to see those reforms, that's going to be on the community to continue to make their voices heard.
One of it's really interesting that you said that. One of the experts that I interviewed, a former Department of Justice attorney who worked on DOJ cases in the past, Christy Lopez was her name. She worked on cases just like this. She told me, hey, you know what? The DOJ reports, pattern of practice investigations, consent decrees, they all have their place, but none of it matters if the community doesn't demand better. They need to know about these things, and they need to demand better, and the pressure from them is what makes it all work, and without that, none of it really matters. So, I mean, I guess as long as that's there, that's where accountability will have to come from.
Well, and here at ABC 15, we've been committed for years to covering these kinds of issues. If you want to know more about the DOJ report, what's been happening as far as reforms in Phoenix Police, you can see our comprehensive coverage online at abc15.com/DOJ. And of course, we are committed to continuing covering this very important issue to our community for likely years to come. Thanks for joining.
Okay, guys, first off, as a host, it's just my opinion, the comments that I make, just to make sure that that's clear to everybody. DOJ is a joke. Our federal government is a joke. They can't do anything right. It's just the hang on. The leaders we've had in the past, the leaders we have, it's sad. It really is. Expertise. Just keep in mind, guys, always record the police because they're not your friends. If you have a recording, then you have a document of what happened. And it's sad that we're in this point, but also it's not surprising. So remember, always film the police because they're not your friends, guys. Be safe, be careful, and we'll talk to you on the next one.